What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the pod. If you thought Venezuela was all threats and sanctions, that phase is over.
Because this time it wasn't rumors. Caracas was hit, power went out. And then the headline nobody expected: Maduro captured.
This isn't escalation theory anymore. This is direct action.
And the real question now isn't will the US intervene, it's what did Washington just trigger?
Let's break it down.
As always, this video will be divided into the facts part and later on our own insights.
As we all know, it's been an explosive start to 2026 in Venezuela, quite literally. Overnight on January the 3rd, the US forces launched a large-scale strike on Caracas and other strategic sites, hitting air defenses, military bases, and infrastructure in a coordinated raid. Within hours, President Donald Trump announced the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, and said that they had been flown to New York to face US indictments.
This was no small operation. The US military, including elite forces like Delta Force and Special Operations Team, all worked together with the aviation, cyber, and intelligence units to suppress Venezuela's defenses before inserting the troops quickly into Caracas late at night. The entire mission was planned and rehearsed for weeks, if not months, to minimize the US casualties and maximize surprise.
By dawn, Maduro was in US custody. Government buildings and electrical grids were disrupted, and explosions rattled the capital. Venezuela media called it imperialist aggression, while US outlets described it as tactical success.
But how did it actually go down? Well, here's how. Around 2 a.m. local time, US aircraft struck air defenses and radar arrays north of Caracas. Then, once the skies were controlled, quick reaction forces, including helicopters carrying special ops troops, inserted into Maduro's compound. And while the helicopters were shooting and the fighter jets were also shooting with the bombs, they were distracting the Venezuelan forces so that Delta Force could go in unnoticed. Then, after some resistance and intense close quarter fightings, the team secured Maduro and Flores and moved them to the US Iwo Jima, then flew them to New York to face charges in federal court. The US officials reported no American fatalities, and at the time of this video, there should be around 80 confirmed kills by the US troops on the Venezuelan armed forces. Everyone agrees that this was a surgical decapitation strike. Not a full invasion, but it was the most direct US military action in Latin America in decades.
Trump publicly framed the operation as a law enforcement action backed by military force aimed at dismantling drug trafficking networks and stopping what his administration called Venezuela's evolution into a narco-terror state. Maduro and Flores are now indicted in Manhattan and on drug and weapons charges.
But Trump didn't stop there. In press briefings, he said the US would temporarily manage Venezuela's governance, with Trump's own team overseeing reconstruction, oil operations, and security until peace and democracy could be restored.
Trump even repeated that the US would run Venezuela for the time being and highlighted the vast oil reserves as key to rebuilding the economy.
Officials have also met privately with major oil executives, pitching investment opportunities in rebuilding Venezuela's energy sector, though many industry leaders remain cautious.
Here's a key point. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's longtime deputy, has been sworn in as Venezuela's interim president by the Supreme Tribunal of Justice and recognized by the Venezuelan military as the constitutional successor. She took office shortly after Maduro's capture.
Rodriguez initially criticized the US action as aggression, calling Maduro Venezuela's only legitimate president. But you can bet your ass she's gonna change opinion now. In fact, she has taken a more conciliatory and pragmatic tone in recent days. Obviously, she was forced, even initiating talks with US officials and restoring diplomatic ties and addressing economic crisis issues.
Rodriguez's rise is significant. She has deep ties to the Bolivarian elite and the Venezuelan power structures, and her leadership is seen by Moscow and others as a way to maintain continuity while navigating this unprecedented crisis.
Remember, this was never just a narco-terror crackdown. While that was part of the reason, the bigger, larger reason is that Venezuela is the largest proven oil reserve in the world, and it controls the industry by having a lot of share in oil, which is central to the geopolitical competition, and that has been true for years.
The US has seized multiple Venezuelan-linked oil tankers in the Caribbean since the strikes, and we also talked about this in our previous episode on Venezuela and US, part of a broader push to choke off revenue flowing to sanctioned networks and to assert control over strategic energy exports.
Trump has framed US involvement as an opportunity to restore production and open Venezuelan oil markets to Western firms, a pitch that has both economic and geopolitical implications amid tensions with Russia and China.
Also, since the strikes, Venezuela's economy has worsened, with the bolivar plunging on the black market and inflation fears rising sharply.
Talks between interim leaders and the US aim to reopen oil exports and stabilize the economy.
The administration has consistently tied Venezuela's oil income to funding criminal networks like the Cartel de los Soles, making this a marquee theme in the White House narrative.
Domestically, Republicans tout the strike as decisive leadership on drugs, border security, and great power competition. But critics, including some of the GOP lawmakers, argue the operation lacked congressional authorization and risks long-term entanglements.
Latin American governments have blasted the US action as a violation of sovereignty and international law, with Mexico, Brazil, and others urging restraint. European governments also called for de escalation and respect for the UN Charter.
Only a handful of leaders, including Argentina's president, expressed support for ousting Maduro, highlighting deep regional divides.
And now we delve deep into our own insights and opinions about the story.
I wanted to say that it is obvious to me that this is a geopolitical move. The economic side of things has been literally stated, unlike Bush, Obama, and previous presidents that always covered US military operations as for peace and democracy, which maybe it could have been half of the reason, but the real reason was and always will be oil. In this case, Trump said, yeah, it's about oil. He straight up said it. And the geopolitical part of it, in my opinion, is that China and Russia, as also Marco Rubio confirmed, have businesses with Venezuela, they have oil tankers that have been seized, and also armaments by Iran. So there's clearly an influence by the Eastern superpowers in Venezuela. And similarly, in my opinion, to what Russia is doing with Ukraine, Trump is treating Venezuela as the South American Ukraine.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that the geopolitical aspect of the story is pretty much important. As like Trump is not only demonstrating that he can oust a president like nothing, like the simplest thing he has done, but he is showing to other like Latin American countries that he can do the same. Also to Central American countries, we know the tensions also, for example, with Mexico, Cuba, Nicaragua, and other countries. And this is interesting how this attack also is indirectly and directly tied to these other countries and enemies of the United States, as Trump defines them. We know it has damaged China and Russia regarding oil. It has technically damaged Iran because they have easily, the US, like Air Force, has easily swayed the Shahed drones that Iran sent to Venezuela. Cuban security guard in the team of Maduro were killed. So there's a very interesting interconnection between all these countries, which are all defined as enemies of the United States. And coming back to the first point I made, like about the fact that now Trump is showing other countries what the U.S. can really do in the Americas, it is interesting now to think how it's gonna happen, who is gonna control Venezuela, because we heard Rubio and Trump that said the United States are gonna manage that, not only the oil reserves but also the country per se through Delcy Rodriguez. Probably we know that she's expected to go to see Trump in the White House these days. So it's really interesting because of course many human rights activists are talking again about colonization. I don't know what you think about it.
Well, of course, we need to have two stances. One which is ideal and idealistic, and the other which is practical, unfortunately. The former, which is the main position of, I would say, European leaders and the UN who condemned this violent act, which is in fact a violent act and an act of aggression. But the thing is, I think it's a dog eats dog world, or at least this is the way it's going towards. And the thing is, the most powerful countries are leading this charge. So even with, for example, Greenland these days, Trump is talking about invading or buying or controlling, let's say, Greenland, and the EU is and NATO kind of threatening Trump, but what are we Europeans going to do to the US forces? Absolutely nothing. And it's sort of the same thing with Russia, and then China obviously condemned this attack on Venezuela. Maybe they're thinking about Taiwan now, since the other two superpowers are all attacking a country. It could be China's turn. I just think that we have to be, as Europeans, aware that the world is changing, and perhaps we have to change our methods too, and show more of our strength if that's there in the first place. I don't know what plans the EU is going to have, if there are any plans at all, but it's one thing is sure: US, Russia, and China are becoming, well, China not yet, but I think also China will be like this. They're becoming more aggressive and more military oriented.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think
Oh,
this,
and sorry,
yeah.
just to add, because you also mentioned colonization. I don't think it's That's just rhetoric. It's not colonization. The Venezuelan people loved this whole operation. They were happy. We've all seen the reels and the memes of the Venezuelan people being happy. Meanwhile, the European white people complaining about this. Of course, smart people know that the US is there for interest. So the benefits of the Venezuelan people will be in the second place. But I don't think it's like a slave trade or a colony 2.0.
No, yeah, I definitely agree on that. For sure, they're gonna find a way to use the most out of the oil reserves. For sure, the United States are
Exactly.
gonna take control of all of that through its own like businesses and companies, American companies. But it's not gonna be something like the Spanish going to South America and colonize the ancient people. So no, it's not gonna be that way. And coming back to what you said about like China, Russia, and the US right now, I think this attack opens a new chapter in 2026, a new chapter where also China now is gonna be more aggressive. As you said, they are seeing their like enemies and allies, so US on the one side and Russia on the other side, that are being very aggressive, attacking, doing things to improve the status of their country, the security, whatever, while they're doing on the ground nothing except like drills. And as we heard also from Xi Jinping, he said at the beginning of the year that this is going to be the year where China is going to do something against Taiwan. So, I mean, the sparks are there. Let's hope they're not going to ignite a fire, but we're going to see that. And before moving to the conclusion, I would like to move to the fact that now Maduro is in Brooklyn in a detention center with other very well-known prisoners, especially like P. Diddy. And what is interesting is that the other day when he had his first, like, let's call it trial, he pledged as innocent. He said, I'm the president of Venezuela, of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and I'm a prisoner of war. And this aspect is very interesting because now the card of prisoner of war is on the table, and is interesting, especially if you consider that the judge that is gonna like be in the court when there's gonna be the trial of Maduro is a 92 years old judge appointed directly by Trump for this case, even though he went to multiple occasions against Trump in court. So it's going to be interesting to see how the whole thing is going to develop, what is going to come out of this, especially considering again that the prisoner of war card is on the table.
I just think it's going to be a very fun conversation between Diddy and Maduro. One talks about oil, the other one talks about baby oil. Sorry, I just had to say this because it's very interesting. No, but jokes aside, I actually want to ask you one very quick prediction, if you can do so. Will the US intervene in Cuba and Colombia, or just Cuba, or just Colombia, or neither?
So we heard the other days that Trump said many countries are gonna have to be alert. So I'm gonna rule out Mexico out of the way immediately. He's not gonna do anything against Mexico. It's too big of a country, too risky. It's not like Venezuela. Against Cuba, probably yes, but I think only after maybe through like soft power, hidden power is gonna make the economy collapse even more so that people are gonna are going to surge in the streets, and only after that maybe he's going to intervene. But I don't know if he's going to do something similar to Venezuela, so to house the leader or not. Colombia, I think not. There's too much mediatic attention on Colombia. Petro is not an appreciated president, but he's not as bad as Maduro. So it would be very much more difficult to intervene in that situation. I don't know if the Colombian people are gonna applaud to this or not. While the Venezuelan, we know they did, but Colombia is different. So I think Cuba is the most likely to happen, but I'm not sure even about that.
Yeah, I think it's a logical assessment. I just want to add one last point, which is, well, it would be too soon to do an invasion or just a ground operation right now. Strategically, it's better to wait rather than stretch thin your forces in another country while you still have to run Venezuela. And with that said, we can move on to the conclusion. So where does this leave us? Capturing Maduro doesn't end the crisis, it opens a far riskier chapter.
Removing a leader is easy. Managing what comes next almost never is.
Oil, rival powers, that divided region, every variable is live.
Push forward and risk a Proximus. Pull back and risk chaos.
That's the real dilemma, and it's only getting messier.
Thanks for rocking with us. Subscribe, follow, stay connected, YouTube, Spotify, X, whether you listen or watch.
Stay informed, stay engaged.
Peace till next time.